Thanks for joining us for Understanding Real Estate with Realtor Becky Cobb of West Cobb Alliance, part of the ReeceNichols Real Estate Group in Neosho.
Good morning, this is Becky Cobb with Understanding Real Estate, visiting with Holly Mitchell of Newton County Abstract and Title. Today, we're going to talk about restrictions. And first of all, we're just going to talk about restrictions in general. Holly, would you explain that?
You bet. So sometimes people will put restrictions on a deed to restrict how it can be used. For example, they'll say no hog, dog, poultry operations, no salvage yards, things of that sort. And they will put those on the deed, and once that deed's recorded, those restrictions stay. There are options to have restrictions removed. We can maybe talk about that.
Yeah.
And another one.
Yeah.
But so restrictions on a deed, the seller wants to put specific things on that. I talked about hog, dog, poultry operations. Maybe only so many houses can be on here. And those things are there.
They're forever and ever and ever.
There's something to be considered whenever you're purchasing a piece of property.
Okay. Good morning. This is Becky Cobb with Understanding Real Estate, visiting with Holly Mitchell of Newton County Abstract and Title. She's been talking about restrictions. One of the things, Holly, that I've always said is, you put a restriction on a piece of land and it goes forever and ever and ever.
Right.
It doesn't always make sense.
Maybe, no, not necessarily. Okay. So some strange restrictions could be put on a piece of property, and a new buyer is like, I don't like those, or I'm interested in the property, but I can't do that. There are some ways to have restrictions removed on property where it's been done by a deed. You can go back to the person who put them on and talk with them and make sure everybody involved that would benefit from the restrictions is involved. But there can be deeds done to remove those, or take some off, leave some on. You can do that. You can also, if the people who put them on cannot be found, people pass and move. Yeah. It can be a court type procedure. You can file a suit, to have a judge rule on this. Are they reasonable? Are they not? And then they could be removed by a judge.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know, because I've always said, what makes sense for this generation doesn't necessarily make sense for a generation or two down the road.
Exactly.
And
yes. So they might have been good at the time, but now, times change.
Right.
Everything changes, and they don't really apply right now.
So that's good to know. Holly's going to talk to us a little bit about restrictions in subdivisions. So this is Holly Mitchell with Newton County Abstract and Title. Take it away, Holly.
Yes, thank you, Becky. So oftentimes whenever a subdivision is recorded, they will record covenants and restrictions also with that subdivision. So setting out what can or cannot be done on those lots. You see that with almost every subdivision recorded. And people need to maybe keep in mind that, if you're buying a lot in town, you can't have a clothesline outside. You can't have chickens outside, maybe. You can have pets, but it's important to read through those restrictions. In the course of the title search, those will be shown. At closing, we talk to people about, here's a copy of your restrictions. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, and we'll answer them the best we can.
And it's always a good idea to be looking at those restrictions during your inspection period if you're purchasing real estate, because once your inspection time period is up, you have already blown your time to make an objection.
Right. That's exactly right.
One of the big things that when you go to purchase property, we're going to talk to you about title insurance. And Holly Mitchell with Newton County Abstract and Title is here to explain the importance of title insurance.
Yes. So a title insurance policy is just that. It insures your property, that you have, clear title, or that these things affect the property. Title insurance protects against the unknowns. We do our best to find everything that we can of record. There are things that happen not of record, or things that we can't control. For example, if somebody signs a deed, maybe they signed it fraudulently, the wrong people signed, or there was a bad notary. If there is a loss, if somebody wants to sue you over your property, and the title insurance would come into play. We protect against those unknowns. We don't know that there's been fraud. We don't know that the notary was no longer a notary, perhaps. But if there's a title loss because of that, your title policy will protect you, and that's what that insurance does. It protects against the unknowns, and there's a whole slew of things that it can protect. There's probably hundreds of things that it would protect against, but it's the unknowns.
And it gets mind-boggling, but it's really important to have title insurance. The only times I've ever had real issues on selling a property usually comes back to title insurance.
Right. Do you have a title insurance policy? And whenever you buy title insurance, it's a one-time only thing. It's not like homeowners or your autos where you have to pay every year. You buy it when you purchase the property, and then it protects you as long as you own the property.
Thank you, Holly, for explaining that. If you have more questions, give her a call. Holly, talk a little bit about trust. And when you are transferring property into a trust, there are some pitfalls you need to watch out for.
Yes. So we were just visiting about one example that I had earlier this week. A gal, she had 2 pieces of property, bought them separately, 2 separate deeds, 2 separate times. There was a deed prepared to put, she wanted all the property in her trust, but just one deed was picked up. So now we have one property in the trust, one property in her name as an individual, and fortunately she realized it before maybe she had passed, because she had planned for it to all be in the trust. But whenever you're wanting to have deeds drawn up or put things into a trust, if you bought them separately, let whoever know is preparing that deed, there should be 2 deeds or 2 legal descriptions. Let's make sure we get them all in there.
Right, and that can happen when you bought your house on 5 acres and then later on the neighbor sold you another 5 acres. So you have 2 different sold dates.
Exactly. Yes. And we want to be sure and get all the property in there.
Together.
Yes.
Together. Well,
Yes.
thank you, Holly. I appreciate that information. If you have more questions about this, remember, the local title company has lots of answers.
If you would like to know more about understanding real estate, you may contact Becky Cobb at 417-592-3245 of the West Cobb Alliance, your realtors for life. Find out more on the web at neosho.homes.